Hey guys, Stuart Trier here from Marketing Cheat Guides. Today I have on the show Mads Singers from madsingers.com. He is a serial entrepreneur who now finds himself working with other entrepreneurs to scale up, working in management consulting, specifically in the digital marketing worlds. And he's going to share some of his tips, tricks, and hacks that he brings to his clients. So stay tuned. And Mads, thanks so much for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you found yourself working in this industry?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me in the first place, Stuart. Awesome to be here. My backstory, again, I worked corporate for about 10, 11 years or so, large companies such as Xerox, IBM, etc. I fell in love with management when I was very young, about 18, and that has kind of been my passion ever since. About 6, 7 years ago or so, I left the corporate world and I started up my own show and basically built a couple of companies up pretty well. I don't really care so much about the money, to be honest. I just love building teams and I love putting teams together. I like finding great people with growth potential and, doing that sort of stuff. And the most fun thing I do is my management coaching. So majority of time nowadays I spend on really coaching sort of small to mid-sized entrepreneurs, a lot of SEOs and e-commerce guys and so on, really helping them grow their management skills, right? Because a lot of people, they start a business, they make a little bit of money, but most of them don't have the skill set, and most people don't. Like, no one is born leaders, right? So most people need to learn management, and that's basically what I do. So I help people understand, I have 3 employees, how do I actually grow this thing? Because in most cases people just end up being spider in the middle, with the people being extensions of themselves, and really what happens is they do become a little bit more effective with staff, but they get to 5, 6, 7, 8 people, and they're working 80 hours a week and life sucks.
All right, so let's unpack that. So there's a lot there. So we have a similar background in terms of working some corporate and then transitioning into helping others. So when you first made that transition from corporate life, the biweekly paycheck coming in, to starting your own business, what were some of the early challenges that you faced adapting into a new environment?
Not enough challenges, unfortunately. So what happened was, actually about a year and a half before I left IBM, I actually started coaching already. So actually, by the time I left, I already had a fairly decent paycheck coming in, right? So I didn't have like a lot of entrepreneurs have if they quit the job and start from zero, right? So probably not enough challenge, to be honest with you. But
I think you're giving a tip there, though. I think that there's a misconception that entrepreneurs are very big risk takers, but successful entrepreneurs tend to mitigate risk every way they can to guarantee results. And similar path. By the time I left my corporate job, I already had a 6-figure income. There was really almost no risk associated with that transition. So I'm glad that you're seeing that. I just want to point that out for the audience that, hey, this is something that is a pattern, and success leaves clues, and this is one of those clues that definitely people should pick up on, that you didn't take this proverbial jump into shark-infested waters. You already knew you were going to be successful.
Yeah, and I'd say that actually 2 key points around that. So one of them was, I actually hesitated for a really long time because honestly, I really loved working at IBM, and that's also different from most entrepreneurs. They tend to hate their day job, and that's why they go out on their own. But I actually loved doing it, and I really didn't run away because I didn't like the job and stuff. So I would say that's definitely one thing that makes it a little bit different. And also, when I first left, I honestly, when I left, I was trying to put myself in a little bit challenging situation. So I moved to Asia, and I tried to get into sort of a different crowd of people, tried to network a lot out here, and there was obviously challenges, right? And I'd say one of the biggest challenges initially was really around, how do you say that? It was really around sort of transition from big corporate. Like when you're used to working with big corporate clients, and what I'd done in the UK was really, I'd started working with other managers in big corporations. And the difference between working with big corporations and small entrepreneurs is huge. Now, on the good end, because really what happened was, as soon as you start working with entrepreneurs, like they just care so much more, right? Like I remember working with a couple of guys from Shell, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, well, I can sit down here for 4 hours and sleep a bit and stuff, right? Whereas when you go in the room with an entrepreneur, like they're on, like if they're paying you decent money, like they're there to learn. They're not just there to relax for a couple of hours and stuff, right? So I really, really enjoy working with entrepreneurs much more than I do with the corporate world, I would say.
Awesome. So how did you start to find your initial clients? So a lot of people watching this are in that challenge where lead generation and sales conversion are challenges they face, and I'm sure you see that amongst your clients as well. So what are some tips or tricks you can share with the audience around A, how you did it, and B, best practices that you're seeing today even amongst your clients?
Yeah, so I'll share a tip. So for about 4 years, neither my coaching business or the outsourcing business I ended up starting actually had a website. And it was primarily built on networking, right? And the thing was, like what I learned in the management world, that it's all about networking. Like get to know a shit ton of people everywhere, right? And I think that was probably one of the most important things I did. Like when I moved to the Philippines in the first place, I like literally every city I went to, I opened LinkedIn. I found like 100 people. I measured up like either business owners, CEOs, or high level type people. I'll literally hit them up on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm new in town. Do you want to have a coffee? And, particularly in Asia, people weren't used to that. So it was a little bit of an interesting experience. But let's say every place I went, I literally met like 20, 30 people. And I really, really quickly built a large network. I also became membership of a couple of network groups and stuff like that for entrepreneurs. But really spent a lot of time just sort of face-to-face networking with other human beings, right? And because even though I was making decent money at the time, I wasn't actually spending a lot of time doing it, right? Like I probably worked 3-4 hours a week, right? So like I had to fill up my time somehow, right? So really the important thing was really getting out and networking. And as I said, for about 4 years, neither my coaching or the VA business we had actually had even a website, just because like I was so gung-ho on the networking. I got a lot of clients, and it was so easy to see they were thirsty for this, because every time I got one client, they're like, oh, this is amazing, and I got like I'd say the first 10 clients probably referred at least 5 people each to me. And it just like really quickly, it just exploded, right? And nowadays I've actually gone into the sort of course world, and I actually built a course specifically, sort of what I call the 80-20 of management for entrepreneurs, right? Which really just condense all the stuff, because a lot of it is the same, right? Like it's often the same challenges with struggling to delegate, struggling to hire the right people, and like what kind of meetings do you run? So it's basically a mix of mindset and attitude, and a good mix of standard business processes. This is what you should do, and this is how you should do it, right?
Fantastic. And amongst your clients today, do you find that they are challenged in terms of lead generation, finding clients that are willing and able to pay them what they're worth, and how do you coach them through that?
All the time. I mean, as I said, I work a lot in the SEO world. So e-commerce is slightly different, right? Because e-commerce is kind of a different beast. But a lot of the SEO clients I have are naturally not the most outgoing persons in the universe, if you will. And it's so funny. Like the first thing I start working with them is it's always management, but I straight away it always end up being like sales and lead generation, and they're like, yeah, I called this client and I told him I could get him links, and he didn't want to pay. Like, does he know what links is? Does he know what they do? Like the whole sales thing, like they think SEO, but they don't understand that everyone else don't think like they think, right? And definitely, I mean, both lead generation, but also the latter part, which is closing the leads, generally a huge issue in the SEO world, right? And so many agencies, so many people trying to, make a quick buck, I would say, but really get established. And I'd say the number one thing I see is a very, very few actually niche down. Like everyone does this. They're like, oh yeah, any SEO client anywhere, take me. And the thing is, they don't stand out, right? And it just makes lead gen so much more difficult. So like the key thing I work with most of them, and it's like, who's your best customer right now? What do they do, right? Like your lead generation efforts for the next 3 months, just focus on people like that. Right? Go out and tell the world you have this client that you have helped a lot, they're a great client, tell everyone that's like them that you've done that, right? Because if you stop doing this and start doing that, you might have a smaller pond overall, but your success rate in closing clients is going to be through the roof. The work you do is so much simpler, and like a lot of time it's repetitive, right? Because in the SEO world, a lot of the time is like doing keyword research, and a dentist in Miami or a dentist in New York, it's the same keywords, right? If they get to understand the niche, like one of the key things for me is when you niche down, even if it's something you're not particularly familiar with to start, if you have 10 clients doing the same thing, you start to understand it. And then that means in your sales, in your marketing, in your anything, you can actually talk much more directly to those people because you actually understand the challenges. And that's why most tech business, SEO, web dev companies, the worst of the worst.
And so once they start to adapt this, so I'm a big believer in niching down. I just think it's the simplest way to go from point A to point B. So once they start to accept this, and the ones that do start to experience some success, what are some of the next challenges that they kind of run into that you're able to help them navigate through?
Yeah, so a couple of the challenges actually, and sometimes they're kind of intertwined a little bit, but a couple of the big challenges is the fact that, one, they don't charge enough. And the thing is, when you want to build a company, like if you're charging, like you only have to pay yourself, that's great initially, but you need to have money for overhead and for tools and all this sort of stuff. So a lot of people aren't charging enough money. And one of the key things with actually niching down is when you know a niche better, you're also much better at adding more value, which means when you add more value, you can also allow yourself to charge a lot more. Right. So the problem is a lot of the time people charge like an hourly rate. They don't charge based on the benefit they bring. They charge a specific hourly rate. Right. And sometimes in lead gen, that's pretty set rate for what's the cost of a lead and stuff. But when you look at it like from many SEO agencies, as an example, like very often what happens is that they just don't charge. They don't charge anywhere near the value. They help a client make 2 million and they charge them $2,000 a month or something, right? And it makes no sense.
It's kind of one of those inflection points in the business. Like you're saying, when people are first starting out from $0 to $10,000 a month, they're looking at it as a job, and then they're really equating an hourly wage that they feel comfortable making. And then when they hit that threshold of, hey, I can't take on any more customers, now they need to start to hire people, and they don't have the room in the margin to hire talented people. And so they run into this problem of, hey, I'm going to want to hire, but there's no good people. And really, it's not that there's no good people. It's that they can't afford to pay a good person to do the work. And so it's like this dance of, well, there's no good people out there, so I can't scale the agency. I don't know if that's your experience, but that's been my
100%.
experience.
And I would say that the one thing that I really see again and again when it comes to this stuff is also like you have to make sure you put yourself in a space where you can actually charge a sensible amount of money. So again, when you're niching down, if you're niching down on, I don't know, personal healers or like people generally who are starting out who doesn't have a lot of money, and even when they're really successful they still don't have a lot of money, they will never be able to pay you a lot of money, right? Just a lot of time I see people like, oh yeah, I'm super spiritual and I like this thing. I'm like, do your clients have any money? Right? If they don't, it's the wrong place to start, right? So really target somewhere that have money. And really, again, one of the examples I use is if you go out and say, I want to hire a carpenter to build me a table, and I get a quote from one carpenter that says he can do it for $100, and I get a quote for a carpenter that says he can do it for $300. Now, everything else being equal, you assume that the guy charging $300 is just better. The problem with always pricing yourself low, when you're dealing with bigger companies, when you're not dealing with people who are scribbling to find a couple of dollars, but when you're dealing with big companies, they rather pay more to get better results. So that when you're pricing yourself low, really what you're doing is you're putting yourself down to all the small fish who have no money, and you're actually pricing yourself out of the let's call it proper companies that have the money, is willing to invest and want quality stuff. Now, the second thing that happens is if you hire a carpenter for $100 to build a table, let's say he brings some wood and accidentally something breaks, and he's like, oh, actually, I didn't account for this piece of wood breaking, so would you mind giving me $20 extra? Now, when that happens, I feel like I had a bad experience because my expectation of $100 was suddenly $120. Now, when you charge $300, you can afford to go that extra step. If the wood breaks, whatever happens, you take that cost because that's built in. And it's the same thing, right? I see every time you work with any web dev company in the world, like what happens is you get an initial quote, and then it's just a question of time of when they say, oh, no, that's not possible, we need more money. Like, it's only a question of time every time. And fundamentally, the problem is, they haven't built in scope to make sure that even if shit happens, even if, they screw up something, or, even if the client wants some small adjustment, that's already taken into account, right? And that's how you need to think. As a business owner, that's how you need to think, because you want to make sure you can deliver a quality service, even if, it starts snowing for a couple of days or God knows what happens.
As you start to see your clients moving from that $10,000, $15,000 a month, trying to scale up, have you seen a pattern of people trying to use white label services to help on the delivery side? Because there's some economies of scale. Once you have enough revenue coming in, you can start to hire a team in specific areas. In the beginning, you're hiring kind of the jack of all trades to kind of help you with things. So what's your experience working with clients who have successfully crossed that chasm of 10 to past 30,000? Are they leveraging the power of white label providers?
So two key things on that one. First of all, organization exists for the specialization of labor, right? And this is where a lot of people go wrong, because what they do is they hire people and they try and teach them to be like themselves, right? So they try and clone themselves. And the problem is when you do that, one, it took you 5 years to get to where you are, 3 years. You don't want to spend 3 years paying someone to learn to become you, right? Wrong move. Second thing is, if they actually learn it and get your skill set, they will leave you and they'll start their own thing, right? And three, it's if they leave, you're screwed, right? So fundamentally with the business I work with, I always say, well, take a step back. You need to look at organization. Now, from an organization standpoint, you want to break out processes and basically take process that takes a lot of time, and you want to compartmentalize roles that do just that. Right? Now, so that's one aspect, right? The other aspect is you want to understand in a business, what do you want to own and what are you okay to let go of? So as an example, if you sell Ferrari, you definitely want to own customer service, because if a company, if a person buy a Ferrari, they expect top quality service. If they phone up and you have some outsourced labor and giving half-witted answers and shit, right, you're going to lose everything in an instant. Right? Now, if you're selling water bottles at 50 cents a bottle or $2 a bottle or something, you probably can't afford to have customer service sitting in the US, realistically, right? That's just an example. So you need to go through and look at the stuff you're doing in a business and say, what are the things that I want to own in-house? What are the things that we're really good at? Or where do we have some leverage? That means we want that in-house. And what are the things you can outsource? So for example, outsourcing office management, right? Like you don't want to run and change light bulbs and stuff. That's common ground. Now, a lot of people outsource accounting because everyone else does it, but the mindset is really the same, right? So look at your business and look at, is there something that other people can get done much faster that can actually take complexity out of your business? Right. So for e-commerce, a lot of the time it's customer service for and stuff like 3PLs and like trying to run your own warehouse is like horrible. And SEO, a lot of the agencies I work with, sort of e-commerce web developers and SEOs and so on. A lot of the time it's looking at, well, actually, you know, we can spend a ton of time over here on link building. We spend a ton of time on page. What is it actually, where do we stand out, right? Well, we're really good at the on-page stuff. Well, what is actually the value right now in us, hiring a bunch of people to try and do this link building, and it's hard to get it under control, and it's a big mess, and why don't you just pay someone to do it, right? So again, but you need to understand what is your strength and what is it okay to let go of, and what is it not. And like, I know a couple of sales guys that started SEO companies, and they literally white label everything. Like, they found a really good SEO agency that suck at getting clients, and they are basically their lifeblood, right? So they literally just take a cut every month of whatever money comes in, and they're doing really well, having to deliver nothing. So
got to know where your strengths lie, like you're saying. I mean, if you have a competitive
100.
advantage of the sales avenue, and that's really what you're good at. You're good at meeting business owners, networking, closing deals, and managing relationships. Then outsourcing to the back end and letting somebody else play in their genius zone seems to make sense from a scale perspective. You could always go back and build a team as you have more resources available. As long as you own those relationships, you're really you're in control of the game.
And capacity, right? So the problem is, if you're trying to build 5 different departments at the same time, like, that's difficult to do really well, right? You really want to start and say, what is the one thing we need to fix? Okay, we need people doing on-page SEO, or we need whatever, right? We want to just focus on that, and the rest of it for now we will pay for. Right. Again, make sure you have the bloody budget to pay for proper quality. Don't sell yourself short on the budget, right?
Perfect. So I'm a big learner. So what are some things that you're reading today or learning today that you consume to keep up on what it is that you want to be abreast of for your clients?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is I spent about 12 years of my life where I literally read a book a week, which means I went through a lot of books. Honestly, I've cut down a lot the last couple of years, just because, both because I got a little bit tired of it, but also because I'm testing out other medias, right? So I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, but I really like I actually really like other sort of more life stuff right now, reading Sapiens, for example, and some of these books that are more about, why are we where we are and all this sort of stuff. Because again, also from a management standpoint, the better you understand people and so on, the more effective you are, right? And I would say even a bunch of the stuff I do now is sort of into the psychology world of things. Again, no intention of becoming a psychologist, but I'd say sometimes you end up with it as a coach, right? Because a lot of time when people aren't delivering or aren't performing, a lot of time the problem is not at work, it's at home, or it's, their friends or whatever. So yeah, coaching comes with a lot of interesting stuff. I'll definitely say a book like Sapiens, as an example, is really interesting. I also really enjoy some of these intellectual lectures that have started to come out. I mean, people like Jordan Peterson and some of these guys, I don't necessarily agree with them, or at least not in all the points, but it's rare thing for me to find people actually having really, really amazing conversations over hours and hours about sensible topics. And also, like a podcast like Joe Rogan, I've also found very, very, very interesting, because it's what a lot of intellectual people would like to, but it rarely happens.
Busy for sure.
People are busy, but I really enjoy that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Okay, and last question. So you manage a lot of people, you're coaching a lot of people. One thing that I'm interested in hearing is, do you have any tips or tricks in terms of productivity for yourself, any morning routines, anything that you like to do to make sure that you're operating at a very high level? As you mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs come on to the talks with you, they're engaged because they're spending money with you. You obviously have to be engaged and ready to go when they log on to the call. So what do you do?
Yeah, I'd say generally, I mean, for me, I'm a habits guy, 100%, right? And I know, like, I go to the gym. I go to the gym 7 days a week, because I know if I try to do it 3 days a week, it won't happen, right? So I'm a habits guy. I have to do it. It's the first thing I do in the morning when I wake up, shower, shave, whatever. Like, habits, right? And it's the same thing in my work routine. Like I have very good routines around when I check my emails, when I do sort of important work, when I do podcasts, I really have a lot of routine about when I do what in the business, right? And for me, routines is basically the essence of getting yourself into the right mindset at the right time, and also just making sure that you really can deliver consistently, right? I mean, I've pretty much for the last 17, 18 years or so, I've had to deliver at a very, very high level, very consistently. And yeah, that's, I mean, if you want to stay on top of your game, for me personally, at least, routine is a huge part of it.
Awesome. So people want to go deeper and explore either your coaching or your program. Where can we send them?
So mattsingers.com is the best place to start. So my management program is called the Effective Management Mastery. And yeah, my coaching is also available on the website and so on. But yeah, that's really the key things.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here. Guys, if you're still watching us, definitely hit the thumbs up. If you have questions or comments, drop them below. Happy to engage with you here on the channel, and we'll see you in the next episode.